welcome to Jung at Harp. This is episode number 201, When One is Missing. Today, Kathleen is missing, and so I am here to talk about the strings of passion, which are the 7 principles that take you from creative impulse to creative expression, and to look at some of Jung's principles, Carl Jung's principles, that may be the most famous principles of his, and see where these two things connect. So almost each week, Kathleen and I meet here to have a conversation with each other and to invite you into that conversation where we're talking about the work that each of us is doing, Kathleen as a Jungian psychoanalyst and a harpist, and me as a composer and a performer, a mentor and a harpist, and looking at the conversations that bring us together, looking through the lens of this one instrument that we each approach in different ways as well as in the same ways. And we invite you into the conversation. We are on this platform, Restream, which does allow you to chat, and often we can see that chat depending on where you're watching from. So today one of the things that I wanted to do, because Kathleen is not here, and I am teaching a class called Strings of Passion, is I wanted to look at strings of passion, and I wanted to see what basic information I could get out there on the internet about Carl Jung and what he might have to say about these things. Now, if Kathleen was here, we would get a much more, we'd get her experience as a human who engages in Jung's principles versus what I'm going to get, which is basically AI looking out on the internet to see, what are the principles that we see most often? And the way that I did this is I took one of the play sheets from the Strings of Passion workshops that I do, and I just put it right into AI. And I said, please look at these principles and tell me where they connect with the most basic principles of Carl Jung, just to see what I would come up with. And so I'm going to share that. But before I do, I want to put this in a certain context, and I want to look at it in terms of something else that happened this week. This week, so my life is full of performing, composing, meeting with people who are helping me to get my work out into the world through publishing, having podcast interviews, and also teaching. And one of the things that I'm teaching right now is called modal improv magic. So that's a word to, create the experience that I have of the magic of modal improvisation. But what it really is a class in which I'm looking at the 7 diatonic modes of music, and not just teaching the modes themselves, how they work, but also looking at how you can improvise with them. And that means that I'm exploring this as well, because my life and my work is constant exploration and discovery through whatever I'm doing, including teaching. One of the modes that so just briefly, one of the things that's very cool about modes is that it takes the 7 basic notes that we know of as the major scale, and we are used to looking at these 7 notes from the standpoint of what we call a major scale. So you hear this. And you want to go, or we can make it more and more dissonant to make us want to go here. And that's important. It has all sort of historical importance in the tonality of the world, blah, 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 blah. But that's what we call the major scale. And then there's what's called the minor scale, which happens to be a third below it, and it sounds like this. Exactly the same notes. What I want you to see is I haven't done anything. If you were looking at a piano, if this harp was a piano right now, it would be as if you were looking at all the white keys of the piano. So all those black notes, which is not quite 50% of them, but probably 40% of the notes, just aren't there. but we're exploring what's available in this, quote, limited universe of notes. And this parallels my experience coming to the harp, experiencing it as a limited instrument. Just as we often will experience in our own lives limitation. And what I discovered on the harp is you can look at it as a limited instrument if you're looking at it from a standpoint of a piano, or if you're looking at it from the standpoint of saying, well, it can't do fast chromatic notes like a flute. Well, it can't do this like a saxophone. Well, it can't go down this far like a bass. And that is how I came to the harp, and how I think many people outside of the harp come to the harp, and all you will see then are the limitations. But as I spent more and more and more time with this instrument, I began to let go of the preconceived notions of what it should be able to do. And as I've let go of those, I've discovered more and more and more and more and more of what it can do, and what kind of access it gives humans in terms of personal expression, and why it was the instrument of the bards. So this whole idea of there being sort of like, well, here's what it is, and it's limited, and if you let those limitations go, it's as though all these parts of it start showing up that were there, but you didn't see them. I want to say that again, because as I said that were there, I heard the word latent in my mind. And this is an important word, because one of the things that I've been researching and looking at and thinking about lately has been the metamorphosis of Lepidoptera, that starts as a caterpillar, becomes a chrysalis, and then becomes a butterfly. And what I've learned about it, and looking at that, tracking that in terms of human transformation. What can I learn about human transformation by looking at this very dramatic and magical, but dramatic and a kind of transformation that's been studied. It's been so studied that someone just said to me last night, do you know that it's been proven now that butterflies can remember being caterpillars? Now, I don't know how that's been proven, but I'm just saying that the transformation of these creatures has been studied a lot. So it's very interesting to go back and use it as a metaphor for our own transformation. And what I was saying when I stopped myself suddenly, I heard the word latent. One of the things I've learned about the transformation of a caterpillar into a butterfly is that in a caterpillar, there are things called imaginal discs. They are, well, that's just what they're called. There are 19 or 20 pairs of these. And once the caterpillar becomes a chrysalis instead of caterpillar, and in which the caterpillar form disintegrates, these imaginal discs unfold like origami. They unfold into the parts of the butterfly that are latent in the caterpillar. They're always there. They're always there. All the things that I'm discovering in the harp through exploring the modal world, they were all there. Everything was there, but it was latent. I couldn't see it because I was looking at the world like caterpillar mind or whatever. And this is part of the beauty of the fourth string of the string of passion. This is part of the beauty of practice as we take on a practice, as we engage with anything, no matter how limited we think it is, as we engage with it, it seems to expand as all the latent possibilities begin to unfold like origami. As I was saying that, I was reminded of a time that I was at a Scottish ceilidh and everybody else was playing instruments, and all I had was a lipstick, the top of a lipstick thing. That was my instrument at the moment. And so I was playing it and, I don't know, I was playing with it, making noise with it. And then it broke and it had this, it just kind of cracked. And then suddenly it had more capabilities for more and different sounds that had been latent within it. So this is all coming back to I want to talk about the strings of passion. I want to look at what principles are in Jung, which I'm going to take from AI because Kathleen is not here. I want to show you what I discovered last week when I was discovering, or this week when I was discovering or teaching. I was teaching something that I didn't know anything about. And what I didn't know about was, how many modes are there? Are there other modes outside of the diatonic modes that I showed you? I showed you that there's the mode that we call the major scale, and there's the mode that we call the minor scale. And without changing anything else, there are other modes as well. There's the Dorian mode, which may just sound like we're listening to something, we've just moved something. It's like we're looking at our street from the house up the block instead of the house that we're in. But if you can kind of hear the quality of the Dorian if you play a certain scale, a certain shapes. And this, you can hear, this is the Phrygian mode, and this is the Lydian mode. And you hear this beautiful, that beautiful, that interval, which exists in all the diatonic modes with the harp in this tuning, but we hear it. We hear it differently. We hear that relationship differently. So are there these 7 modes that are diatonic modes, but then there are modes that we can create by shifting some of these levers. And I'm just going to take a minute here to read what you, never miss a com. Oh, no, that's not you. Oh, beautifully. So Totally saying, express this so creatively and eruditely. Well, thank you. I will continue then. So what I was teaching yesterday, well, what I did yesterday, I'm giving a class. The class is going to come out on February 21st. And when you're promoting something, you're like, and I will teach the 7 modes and 2 bonus modes. I want to teach 2 bonus modes. Yes, that's going to be fabulous. But what are the 2 bonus modes? So then it's like, okay, this is an opportunity. What are those 2 bonus modes? Well, I know what one of them is. It's the angel mode, and I'll show it to you in a second. But then I looked up, like, what is another mode? And what I saw was something called the Phrygian dominant. Now, it turns out that I work in this mode all the time. I've been playing with it since I was a kid. It's the foundation of... It's sometimes called the gypsy mode, and I use it, for like... I've been using it my whole life, but I never thought about the fact that it's a mode and that there are other things that I could do with it, that I could play with. And so I started looking at it with the other people in the class. I just started looking at, first of all, I applied a pentatonic scale to it because that's kind of how I listened to it. And then we just started playing more, and I discovered this is just a chord, but I added a 4th underneath. So I created a chord based on the main chord of this mode, which is E. Happens to be an E major chord. But I started exploring what kind of shadow is there, or what kind of reflection is there that I could play. And I found that when I created a reflection or a shadow, a 4th down, I started to get this magical, and then I looped it. So now it's looped. I started to just listen to what I could put with it. And then I started thinking about, okay, what are some progressions that I could add to that? And I think, I'm trying to remember exactly what I did. No, it wasn't that. Oh, I remember what I found. Was it this? No. Anyway, I kept exploring. That's what I found. Is that what it was? As I started exploring it, and I'll have to go back to my notes to see what I did, I began exploring how could I get myself to really stay in this world instead of wanting to go to this world, which in a different, sorry, now I realize that I'm on like harmonic, I'm going off on a harmonic tangent. The point is that I've always believed that if you know nothing about something and you start playing with it, and especially if you start playing with it with someone else, you will begin to know more and more. And that's kind of where I came to this week, was discovering this new mode, discovering how to go about playing with it, discovering how to resist what it took to resist my ear wanting to go back to either the major or the minor mode. And then what does that tell me about transformation? What does it tell me about what is available to me here? An instrument that I've been studying for years and that feels at this moment as if it's opening up to me for the first time. I think this is how we want to feel our whole lives about everything that we're doing and every relationship that we're in. That we have just hit that point where what is latent is now unfolding. That's my thought. That's where I start today. And so from here, I want to look at these strings of passion. I want to look at these 7 principles that I discovered that help me explore anything in order to get from the point of musical impulse to musical expression. And because this is Jung at Harp and it's not just me talking about it, I want to go and take a look at some of the principles that AI, since Kathleen is not here, says are the same principles or similar principles as put forth by Carl Jung. So I will have to jump over to AI every once in a while to take a look at those while we're talking. But I can also take your comments. And I really do want to take your comments because that's part of what is fun about this particular platform, is that we can take these comments. And I just want to say also, for any of you who are interested in taking this modal improv magic class, it would be great if I had an easy way for you to actually take it, wouldn't it? But I don't. So the best thing for you to do is just to go to hipharp.com. That's hip as in cool, harp as in the instrument.com, and then go to the contacts page, find the ask a question form, and figure out how to get in touch with me. It would have been nice if I'd figured that out before I got here, but I didn't. So that's how it is. So now let's look at the very first principle of strings of passion. And I'm going to go back. Oh, I promised you I'd also show you angel mode. So I'm just going to show you that too. I showed you the diatonic modes. Now I'm going to show you angel mode, which on the harp, you've heard it a gazillion times, whether you're a harp player or not. It's well known from the concert harp, and it sounds like this, or it sounds, it can change, but we just call it angel mode because when you do that, people are like, oh, there's an angel, or oh, I'm going to transform into something else now. But the reason that it works is that it actually removes notes. So I told you there's 7 notes in a scale, but in this case, these 2 notes are the same, and these 2 notes are the same. This is kind of cool too. And because there's only 5 notes in the scale, you hear this sort of angelic sound. So that's what's called, I think it's also called a pentatonic scale. But on a harp, it's often called a glissando. The glissando is when you, like, this is also a glissando, but this is a diatonic glissando. That's a angel mode glissando. Okay, now I'm getting like super technical, and I don't want to do that. I'm going to put my harp back in the key of C, and what I'm doing here is I'm shifting these levers. If you think of an instrument like a guitar, a guitarist is using one hand to shift the notes. And on the harp, I'm playing the notes with my fingers, but when I need to shift them to what you would call the black notes on the piano, I do them with these levers. So they're a little bit like fretting, but it's mechanical. So let's start with the first string in the string of passion, the first principle. And by first, I don't necessarily mean that it's the one you have to start with, but we often start with it. And that's the string of impulse, the desire to do, to be, to feel. For me, the desire as a child, let me touch that. Let me do that. Stop showing me. Let me. I want to. For your hands to touch, to experience what happens when you're not just observing something, but when your body is engaging with it. The impulse to do, to be, to touch, the sense of desire. And I often say when I'm talking about this string that before we ever worry about being desired ourselves, we experience desire itself. Eventually we sublimate that, but this desire is always there, and that is impulse. That is the first string. For me, it was the impulse to tell a story, to reach out, to touch, to play the music that seemed to come out of that story. So now I'm going to go over and I'm going to see what AI has to say about that string and what might map to it in Jung's world. And it's saying that Jung's concept of libido isn't just sexual energy. It's the fundamental psychic energy that drives all creativity and self-expression. And it's talking to me, AI is talking to me, having given it the strings of passion. It's saying your emphasis on desire before desirability connects to Jung's belief that we must honor our authentic impulses rather than what we think we should want. If Kathleen was here, I'm sure she would be speaking much more about that. But she would be talking about how she experiences it in other people and how she's learned about it and how she experiences it in herself. But what we can do is take those two ideas, the idea of that string, and thinking about it as one string in a mode, in a whole resonant body, just one of those things, that is the first string of passion. The second string of passion is the string of structure. And the story that I often tell when I first really discovered structure was that my stepfather was a child psychologist. And I don't know if he was experimenting on me or what, I don't know what, but he would try things out on me. And one night he came to the table after dinner and he had a bowl of sugar, he had a spoon, he had a pencil, he had a glass of water and a string. And he tied the string onto the what he first did, he filled the glass of water. He told me to take a spoon of sugar, put it into the glass of water and stir it up. And I did that. And then he said, okay, do another spoon of sugar. So I took another spoon of sugar and I stirred and I stirred and I stirred until it disappeared, and took another spoon of sugar and did it again and again, 4 or 5 times, until the water was saturated with sugar. It was no longer disappearing. I could now see it as a maelstrom of sugar. And then he put he told me to tie the string onto the pencil. So there was this swirling sugar water, and there was the string hanging down. I put the pencil on top of the glass, and the string was hanging down. And then he said, okay, let's go to bed. And so we went to bed. And in the morning, I came out, and the string in the sugar water was covered with crystals of sugar, covered with them, hanging there. And of course, I was falling in love with my new stepfather because he was coming up with these beautiful, magical things, which was probably his intention, to be loved by this new child in his life. But he was also giving me magic for my life. And I said, how is this so? How is this so? And he said, well, sugar will always crystallize. It's in its nature. That's what it will do. But if there's a string, then the sugar will crystallize on the string. And so look to insert that string in the sugar water. Look for that string in the sugar water, the thing that organizes all that's natural anyway. And probably he didn't say that, and probably I didn't ask like that. But over time, that is what I heard. And I was always looking in my life for the string in the sugar water, the organizing principle, the structure. And that is why the second string of passion is the string of structure. So it starts with the impulse, and then there's the string of structure. And for me as a child, that structure was always a story. It was a story I could always tell that had sound. There would be rain, there would be going down, there would be coming up, there would be scary things. And I could always use sound to tell that story. So it was simple. So what does AI say that Jung says about structure? And it says archetype as container. The string in the sugar water is essentially an archetypal container. Jung emphasized how the psyche needs form to give chaos meaning. Archetypes provide the internal structure that allow creative freedom, just as the 12-bar blues structure liberates improvisation. And I would say just as a skeleton inside an animal, although it's so funny because I've been talking about caterpillars and they have no internal structure. So that I'll have to go back and look at that metaphor again. But like the internal structure of an animal gives it something to move on. So we have impulse, we have structure, and then the third string is the string of character. The way we do things, the sound of someone's voice, the way that they move, and you know that you can see them by the way they move, even if you can't see them, if you can only see the way they move, you know it's that person. This is character. So there is impulse, there is structure, and there is character. And if you look at a piece of music at written music, you may or may not know the impulse. You might find out the impulse by reading the title of the music. You will see the structure of the music on the page, maybe. Sometimes you have to almost squint your eyes to get out of the minutia of what's on the page to see the structure, to see how it's built. And then you will see that there are information all over that music that talks about character. You'll see slurs that say these notes are together as a phrase. You'll see what are called articulation marks, which tell you how you're going to play it. Are you going to play it the staccato? Are you going to And this is one of the things I really have trouble with in writing out my own music, because how do you write this? Like, what kind of articulation is that? So, but all these markings make the difference between if I just write on the page versus, which lets me, sorry, I just got a note up from my screen. Sorry, I got distracted. Coming back in, landing with you, figuring out how to write things out, how to write those articulations if you're not writing standard music. Anyway, they're all over the music, and you can see them. You can see mezzo forte, mezzo piano. You can see people like Debussy and Mahler writing whole descriptions of what's happening character-wise with the music. So you can create music with only those 3 strings: an impulse, a structure, like a story, and character. Even if you do not know how to play this instrument, you could create a story. If I said to you, well, there's different things that you can do with it. You can play it, you play the notes, you can whoosh across it, you could knock on it. Here are all the different ways you could make sound with it. What's the story that you want to tell? Go ahead and tell that story with the music, which doesn't mean that you have to be, and so someone knocked on the door. No, you don't have to do that. If you listen to, I've just been listening to this show on BritBox called Shetland, and the music is filled with sounds like this that are not, what do you call it? Literal. It's not like, and the wind was blowing. They just are sounds that start to have a character, to bring a character into the music. And they have sounds like that would bring character into the music. So this is something that I keep trying to tell, because my passion in teaching is to unlock people's story, and to unlock it with an instrument, because the instrument can give you a platform, if it's only because it helps to give you a place to focus, and you don't need to know how to play that instrument in order to use it to tell your story. And so many people get caught up in that. So I will tell you the rest of the strings. I know we only have a few minutes. I will tell you the rest of them, but I really want to emphasize how without having to know how to play an instrument, you can use it to tell a story, because you have an impulse, you have a structure. The story itself is a structure. There are other structures you can use, but story itself is a structure, and character is something that you can do without technical specific knowledge. So let's go look and see what AI says about what Jung has to say about that. And it says, character is like the individuation and the self. It says, the, quote, ineffable that gives meaning to the concrete. The ineffable that gives meaning to the concrete. And I'll say it one more time. The ineffable, the character, that gives meaning to the concrete. So the notes are concrete, but they have no meaning until they have character. It's essentially the expression of the self with a capital S, that unique signature that emerges through the individuation process. It's what makes your expression distinctly yours. And this individuation process is so interesting in music, because we often feel like, well, I have to become this kind of a player and be able to do this technically and this technically and this technically in order to be able to kind of earn the right to be self-expressed. So I have to be able to play in order to express, and it's not true. Because I could go, and I'm expressing the same thing with the capabilities of the instrument, not the capabilities of me. This is the capability of the instrument combined with my physical self-expression, something I started learning when I was, 6 months old. So I guess I'm on a soapbox right here, right now, to encourage people to really engage in self-expression with their impulse, even before they think they have earned the right to do that through being able to be technically proficient. So anyway, we have impulse, we have structure, and we have character. And then the fourth string is the string of roles. I'm going to see if I can get through all of these in the next 5 minutes. So roles are where it starts getting more complex, where instead of I'm just playing, I have a bass, an accompaniment, and a melody. You can see me. If you don't have to hear me, you might even want to turn off the sound. I'm playing bass, I'm playing accompaniment, I'm playing melody. And you can see the character of these. You can see that the bass is kind of like, it's just a note. It's a note. This, you can just see it. I'm playing several notes. Single note bass, single note melody. Because melody is like the flight of a bird. It's something that goes from one place to another place. I could add chords underneath it. I would be adding accompaniment underneath the melody, but I've got these 3 roles. And when I've got these 3 roles, I can play those 3 roles myself, or I can say, you play the bass, you play the accompaniment, I'll play the melody, and then let's switch. So it allows us immediately to actually have a much more engaged. It can let us, it's not better than not having roles, but it's just, it increases the complexity and that we're doing something together. Even if I'm doing it alone, I'm doing it together. Taking on a role can also mean taking on the role of a character that might open you up to new experiences and new expressions. It might mean fellowship and leadership. Those are other roles. But this whole 4th string is all about roles. And let's see what AI says that Jung would say about this. Roles equal archetypes and persona. You explicitly reference this, ! says AI. Playing different roles, bass, melody, accompaniment, connects to Jung's understanding that we contain multitudes. Archetypes allow us to access what we don't know we know. So this is the place where, are we talking about character or are we talking about roles? And the answer is yes, we're talking about both. And AI is also saying that Jung would say collective wisdom through embodiment, roles, collective wisdom. And I would also say learning about our own individual wisdom through embodiment. And this also relates to healthy persona work, knowing which mask to wear when. I don't know anything about this. Another reason why I love having Kathleen here, she would be able to tell us. So let's look at the 5th string. The 5th string is the string of practices and practicing. We practice something to get it right or to get it clean, or to get stronger at doing it. But we take on a practice to let it get to us. One of the classes that we have at Harp Academy is called Transformational Practices. And the whole class, it's just a sharing class that happens before the regular chat, is where we talk about a practice that we took on and what came out of it that we weren't expecting. The one I often talk about is I started brushing my teeth with my left hand. This is something I always wanted to do, and then discovered that I had more facility with shifting the levers, something I'd never thought about coming out of brushing your teeth with the left hand. But that is the principle of practicing and practices. And as you take on each of these, any of these, they will start to open up. And I realized, going back to the beginning of the conversation, talking about the latent whoever we are latently, like if we were a caterpillar, the butterfly is latent in us. All that is latent in us as musicians, as artists, as creatives, come out or begin to unfold through these practices and through these strings of passion, understanding them or just putting them into play. So what does AI say that Jung has to say about this? Practice, shadow work, and integration. I talk about, when I'm speaking more at length about the strings of passion, that the practices string is kind of like you have to be bad to be good. You have to do it. You have to embody it in order to have a relationship with it. And everything's born slimy, everything that you do and everything that comes out. So you have to go through that phase. So AI is saying you have to be bad to be good is essentially shadow integration. Jung insisted we must encounter and practice with our rejected, clumsy, bad parts. The phrase, don't try to get it, let it get to you, mirrors active imagination, allowing the unconscious to work on you rather than forcing conscious control. Great. That is definitely one thing that I experience in practices and practicing. The sixth string is the string of deconstruction. And one of the things I love about it is that I am deconstructing even as we speak. In talking to you about the 7 strings of passion and in connecting it to just, like garden variety Jung that I'm being given by AI, is deconstructing. And deconstruction allows us to create a fundamental seed of something, to go down to the simplest form. So I'm constantly teaching deconstruction. And for myself, when I'm playing a piece of music, it is a map to me. It's not a bunch of notes. I deconstruct it into the structure of it, because that allows me to see it in one view rather than having to remember what happens next. And it also allows me, like a map allows you when you get lost, to find your way back rather than trying to follow some linear path. Deconstruction gives us the fundamental seed, but it also gives us a map that we can then follow. So we've got impulse, we've got structure, we've got character, we've got practices, roles, bass, accompaniment, and melody, or all the other roles in life. We've got practices and practicing, we've got deconstruction. And what does AI tell us that Jung would say about deconstruction? And I only have like 2 more minutes. Deconstruction, the transcendent function. This is pure transcendent function. Jung's process of holding opposites, structure, freedom, known, unknown, to create something new. Deconstruction breaks down rigid conscious structures so unconscious material can recombine into fresh creation. Right. So things can recombine. When you break it down, it opens up new possibilities. Reading here, it also connects enantiodromia. I don't know about that, but I will learn about that. Enantiodromia, things transforming into their opposites. Okay, never heard of that. That will be something to explore, because finally, the 7th string is the string of liftoff. And that's the string where you stop trying to get all the other strings and you just let it happen. And then you can bring any of them in. But the liftoff is that moment when whatever is in you, you go with that. Whatever you got, that's it, and you go with that. So it's impulse, structure, character, roles, practices, and practicing, deconstruction, and liftoff. And then finally, I want to read this one thing of what AI says that Jung says about liftoff is the union of opposites and wholeness. Oh my gosh, this is quite long. The performance moment when we drop conscious practice and trust. It is the I don't know what that means. The union of conscious practice and unconscious Embodied knowing, it's when ego surrenders to self. Your phrase, all we are doing in our vulnerability is revealing one answer to what it means to be human, is essentially describing the individuated self expressing wholeness. AI says overarching themes, the creative process as individuation. Your entire framework describes the journey from fragmentation to wholeness through creative practice. Conditions as psychological environment. Your emphasis on conditions rather than willpower mirrors Jung's understanding that we must create the right psychological container for transformation. The chrysalis of our minds, connection, not perfection. This is deeply Jungian. Wholeness over perfection, integration over ideation. Then it asks me, would I like to explore how any particular string connects to specific Jungian concepts in more depth? Well, of course, but not today. Thank you for being here. I wouldn't have come here without you. And that means even Kathleen in her absentia. She will be back next week. I feel like I know more. I feel like I have more. I feel like I experience more of life because we were here today together, exploring together, exploring this amazing thing we have. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here and for all the notes that you send and for watching all the different streams that we have and for making a way for Kathleen and I to have a conversation that started years ago and to keep having it with each other, with ourselves, and with you. And thank you. Go forth and harp on the good things in life. And we will see you. Both of us will be here next week. Thank you so much. Farewell.
Visit jungatharp.com for show notes, contact links, and to follow the ongoing conversation. That's Jung, as in Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst, and harp, as in the many-stringed instrument.